I'm Marcy McDonald, the online course doctor, and I am here to help you improve your online courses by unpacking what works, what doesn't, and what you can do to make yours better. Now, today we'll be talking to Robert Greenberg, also known as Bob, the most prolific course creator I have ever met. Bob's a composer, pianist, music historian, author, and a storyteller. He's performed all around the world, and he's lectured for some of the most prestigious musical and arts organizations in the United States. Bob has recorded, listen up, 666 lectures on a range of composers and classical music genres for the Great Courses, also known as the teaching company where I used to work. His mission in life is to deepen the musical experience so as to enrich our lives and to make us happier. His passion, in his own words, is sharing the power of music to move us, groove us, teach us, and inspire us. Well, Bob and I worked together on multiple projects at the Great Courses. I have to confess, though, I'm so musically challenged that I was always the second reader, never the first. Bob's what I would call the ultimate performer. He delivers courses that both educate and entertain. The Bangor Daily News in Maine at one point called Greenberg, quote, the Elvis of music history and appreciation, end quote. I think this describes Bob and his courses perfectly. Bob, welcome. It's so great to see you again, and thank you so much for taking time to talk with me today about your experiences making online courses.
Thank you, Marcy. Great to be with you.
Great. So, Bob, you have recorded an amazing number of lectures, 666 lectures at 45 minutes apiece. How many courses is that?
And that's just, I want to point out, that's just for the Great Courses. I've also recorded courses myself, another 34 lectures. So the number is actually 700 lectures on the button. And that's 32 courses.
Holy mackerel. Well, of all those, which one was the best selling and which was the worst? And do you have any idea why?
Well, the bestseller was the first one I made for the Great Courses because it's been in 3 editions, the first in 93, the 97, the 2006. And that's How to Listen to and Understand Great Music, which is a big 48 lecture introduction to Western music from ancient Greece up to the year 1913. It covers historic issues, it covers economic issues, it covers music theoretical issues, and how music's a mirror of the changing world around it. So that has been the best-selling course, and for every good reason. It's kind of music 101, tunes for goons, the intro that everyone should have before moving on to the more complex courses that I've also made. I wouldn't like to think of a other course as the worst, just as a lesser recognized one. I would say that the toughest courses to sell are those that deal with 20th century music, just because so many folks don't realize how much they would be excited by a course on Shostakovich or a course on Igor Stravinsky, for example. So my guess would be the least selling courses would be those that deal with 20th century repertoire. Having said that, I'm crazy about them, and I can only hope that someone's going to be inspired to go out and get them based on this conversation.
That's very important, what you're saying here, Bob. So sometimes we have to start people kind of at a baseline and then step them up to something more complicated or that they perceive will be more complicated, like the 20th century music.
It always helps. Listen, we all take prerequisites when we're younger, and there's a justifiable reason for that. We need to create a vocabulary. Without a vocabulary, we can't describe experience. And if we can't describe experience, there's a good argument that says we're not going to have it. I mean, we all laugh at wine speak, right? Because these are ridiculous phrases. Oh, a hint of tobacco and old leather here. But by having words to address phenomena, we can recognize those phenomena in a way that we might not ever have been able to without the language. So using a good vocabulary and knowing what the vocabulary means, how to hear phenomena and having words to apply to it, is half the job. And once we've got them, we can use them.
Well, Bob, you do an amazing job actually at getting down to what that vocabulary is and how to unpack it. And I think one thing that might be important here is that you're known both for your delivery as well as your content, and you write full script. So you give yourself a chance to really work through those questions of how much do I have to unpack them. But you also practice your scripts until you can deliver them with a dramatic flair, hence that Elvis touch. So how did you arrive at that approach, and how does your audience like it?
Well, the audience, I'm convinced the audience must like it because I keep getting hired to make more courses. You know, when I made my first course for the Great Courses, it was in '93, 25 years ago. I was a classroom teacher like everybody who makes those courses. And I worked off of a sheaf of yellow notes. And as any classroom teacher does, you pause, you hem, you haw. When your mind is blank, you take a question from one of the kids, and that will stimulate new conversation. It's very loosey-goosey being in a classroom. I found standing in front of cameras, 3 cameras, very intimidating. It's always intimidating. And the techniques of classroom teaching do not work in the television medium. I quickly came to realize that you can't hem and haw. You can't search for words. You can't mix your tenses. You can't use bad grammar. You've got to keep moving and keep a rhythm going. That's the demand of the medium. So as I started working for the Great Courses, I realized more and more I had to be on stage in a way that I don't have to be on stage in a classroom. Now, the big change came in 1998. I think that was the year, because that was the year we went from no teleprompter to teleprompters. And of course, when you're using a teleprompter, you have to script because that's what's being displayed. At first, I thought this was going to be an impingement on my spontaneity. But it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me as a professional, because A, it forced me to consider everything I was writing. B, it made me a much better writer, and my prose had a certain lyricism to it. And C, I could include much more material. If you're not stopping and starting and repeating things to kind of get your own brain back online, I found myself adding an extra 1,000 words per 45-minute lecture. In a 45-minute lecture, I can usually get out 4,800 to 5,000 words plus musical examples. In the earlier lectures, I was doing maybe 3,600 different words. But I was repeating myself because that's what we do in a classroom. But we don't have to do that on media because someone can always rewind and re-listen. So too much repetition in a media course, I think you're wasting your students' time. And to a degree, you're not building as much information as you can. So the teleprompter changed my entire way of working, all for the better as far as I'm concerned. Better information, better written, more of it.
You raised some great points in that little bit there, Bob, including that you really have to remember that people can rewind or replay in this day and age. It's replay, not rewind.
Right.
And that you have to pack your information in tightly. So scripts help a lot of people to do that. Do you think that other course creators should be writing scripts, or do you think that's an individual decision?
I do, to the certain degree that you need to tell your story and it has to be clear. You know, again, one of the things that I think has made me successful at what I do, I'm a trained composer. That's my PhD, and that's what I would do if I didn't have to make money and a living. And I write 6 months every year. And if you write for a living or compose for a living, you know everything's got to have a beginning and a middle and an end. An exposition where you present what you're going to talk about, a development where you build it, and a conclusion where you bring back the ideas, but expanded based on the previous information in the development section. I mean, this is how rhetoric works. It's how storytelling works. And really everything is storytelling, and I need to tell a good story. So by having to sit down and force myself to write, I'm forced to think about that dramatic line, that rise and that fall. Where's the peak of the lecture? What are the 3 things I want people to remember after they walk away from the lecture? What's the point of the lecture? What are the goals of the lecture? I think by scripting, I have forced myself to really consider this in a way that if I was just going off the cuff, I might not. I mean, think what you're competing with. You're competing with television. You're competing with movies. You're competing with these master stories and master storytellers who do shape a story. And again, the medium is the message. Good teaching is storytelling, and good teaching on media has to do what we're expected to see from media. I can't tell you how many times I've turned something off because I'm thinking to myself, where's this going? Or if it is going somewhere, but is going there slowly, I'm sorry, I have to go pluck my eyebrows. I've got other things to do.
Right, well, I totally agree. So besides things being boring, what drives you crazy yourself about making online courses?
I wish I could say something negative, but I can't. The only hard part, I would say, is I've made 2 courses by myself in my studio right here using my camera and my computer. Having to edit those courses was a nightmare. But working for the great courses, I don't have to do that. We have those incredibly talented wizards working for us, making us look better than we really are. So I would say for the people you're speaking to now, the hardest part is, as far as I'm concerned, is not the preparation. It's the execution of the post-production. That was hard.
Having just finished recording my first course, I totally agree, because I was so spoiled by the excellence of the crew at the great courses that it never occurred to me that it wouldn't be as easy as it looked there.
Yeah, it's gnarly. And then having to look at yourself during the whole process. My God, most of us go out of our way never to look at ourselves on video, and then have to look at yourself for weeks at a time. Oh, very painful. Very, very painful.
Truly, truly painful. So are there special challenges to teaching music courses besides the intellectual property aspect in the way that you unpack it or put it together?
Yeah, the challenge is what we were talking about before, creating a vocabulary and actually understanding what we're hearing, both emotionally, but also intellectually, getting it. You know, it's so hard. I start saying, well, this is in major and that's in minor. And a listener might say, what the heck is major and what the heck is minor? I have to teach my students how to hear a language that they understand verbally but have no reading ability. The other big challenge is, and I make a point of this, I don't use music notation in my courses. In some of the side materials we hand out, there might be a melody written out here and there. But during the course of my lecture, it's all listening and hearing, but no reading music. So it's always a challenge, especially when we made a theory course called The Fundamentals, which goes into pretty good depth. How do I teach this? How do I use musical examples? How do I play stuff at the piano in such a way that we don't have to use notation? It was like teaching creative writing without using written language. It was a big challenge and remains a big challenge because it's so easy to fall back on notation.
Right. So to teach incredibly well, you have to be very innovative and analytical.
Correct. And I would add something else as far as the great courses go. Again, I'm not sure this is an issue with your clients, but our courses all come out, as did the ones I made, in both video format and in audio format. Now, the video format soundtrack is the audio, so it's exactly the same thing. But of course, on the videos, we can do all kinds of production stuff. Could put up pictures and illustrations and highlight certain things. But people listening on audio cannot know what they're missing. They can't feel like they're not getting the whole show. And I can't refer to visuals. I can't refer to illustrations, because then someone listening in their car or while they exercise will feel, oh my goodness, I'm missing out on half of what's going on. So if the folks that might be watching this are also creating audio for podcast, and I would recommend it. My goodness, we want to broadcast it to as wide an audience as we possibly can. And if it's not absolutely necessary that visuals be there, then keep in mind that a lot of people do listen in their car. A lot of people do listen while they exercise or walk. And if you can create a product that will allow them to do that, you'll open up the base tremendously. So that's always been a challenge for me, is to tell my stories in such a way that someone listening can get as much as someone watching.
Right. I actually did a post not too long ago about the advantage of putting your course out there in as many formats as possible, but the challenge is because you do have to really consider what you can't say if you're going to have an audio version. So I'm not sure you remember, because it's been so long since you did your first course, but can you tell us the worst advice you ever got about how to make an online course?
I got no advice at all. You know, when I started at the great courses and when I started working in a studio, it was a brand new company. We were all flying by the seat of our pants. So I wasn't told anything, which was great. I have to say, I've been very lucky, really, and I'm not trying to be a Pollyanna here. We all started together at the great courses, basically trying to figure out how to do this. And I kind of grew up with the company. And now, of course, it's an incredibly professional, high-end, totally slick production company. You can't find better people anywhere. So when I have been given advice about, you got to stand still, because I used to crawl back and forth on stage. Oh, in our first course, we had a cameraman who was a lovely guy, but he was doped up all the time. And he used to say things to me like, dude, man, you're making me car sick, man. Can you like pick a spot and just spend a couple of seconds there, dude? And I said, I'll try. But, you know, I was so used to walking back and forth from teaching in the classroom. But he was right. He was right. You've got to give the medium what it needs. And being stationary doesn't mean you can't move your hands. It doesn't mean you can't move around a little bit. But you got to think about that, because when people are watching, you don't want them to get all focused on your hands. You don't want them to get focused on the fact that you can't stand still. It's distracting. So I would say 99.9% of the advice I've gotten has all been good advice.
Well, was there ever a course that you were making where things did seem to fall apart for a while, but you came up with a solution that worked?
Never happened. And the reason why that never happened is because I always came in loaded for bear, meaning that the recording was the easy part, the fun part, the last little layer on top of all the work I'd been putting in. And if you're surrounded, as I was, by colleagues, by production colleagues who do their job so well, all I have to do is stand there and read the prompter and make it sound informal and spontaneous, which is easy because I wrote it to make it sound spontaneous and informal. So no, I never had a problem. I do know, however, and we know the stories, I'm sure you were witness to any number of them, when someone comes in ill-prepared, when someone is not ready to stand in front of cameras, when the material is not properly set out, when they don't have an idea of what goals they have and what they want to accomplish. And then disaster is inevitable. It's all, you know, for me, Marcy, my whole professional life as a composer, as a teacher, as someone who records courses, preparation, preparation, and preparation. Rehearsal, 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 practice, practice, practice. You can never be too prepared. You can never over-practice. You can never be too ready. So the advice I would give, when it's time to stand in front of the camera, all the work should be done. This should be the fun part of the process.
I agree. I cannot tell you how many times I begged people to just practice before they started recording. That's all you need, just practice, practice, practice. And it always paid off with you. That's why you have been so incredibly successful. And I have watched you and enjoyed your courses, and I've listened to you all across the country and enjoyed your courses. It makes an enormous difference.
You know, when you're in a studio, I know it's a lot of, when I made my own courses, it was just the one camera sitting in my Mac. But when you're in a studio and you've got 3 cameras on you and one of them is a jib, so it's always weaving around and going up and down, and you're being told to constantly move between those 3 cameras, and you have 3 prompters, one on each camera, and the prompters have the movement instructions on them, and you have to just kind of casually stroll around and look like this is just you in a living room. You learn that if you aren't prepared, I can't function. I can't do all that stuff if I'm not ready to say what I need to say. 3 cameras staring at you, that's a triclops. That's scary. That's a monster ready to eat you up.
That's true. And for most people, they're going to be recording with just a single camera, their laptop or their phone, but it's still a monster if you don't practice.
It's still a camera, and it's going to record exactly what you do, whether you like it or not.
Right. So, Bob, a lot of great advice here. And before we wrap up, I'm wondering, I know you have a new project, your Patreon project. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, thank you for bringing that up, Marcy. Well, I've had to do a lot of traveling and a lot of speaking over the last bunch of years, because that's how someone like me makes a living. And I'm not getting any younger, and I have 4 kids, 2 of them still in the house, and being away every weekend is getting very old for me. And so rather than make my money that way, I'd rather write essays and blogs and do vlogs, and I do them right here in my studio, and put them on this wonderful platform called Patreon. And what it is, it's a subscription platform for musicians and artists and so forth, folks who want to put their materials online, and people can subscribe to their platform. So you could subscribe for $2 a month or $5 or $10. If you subscribe to my platform for $100 a month, you get all my freebies, and you get to come to my house for dinner as many times as you want. I'll feed you, make you martinis. It's a good deal. It's a very good deal.
Wow, that sounds fantastic, like the perfect platform for you at this point in time.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's all we have time for today, Bob. It's always a pleasure. Friends, be sure to check below the video for links to not only Bob's courses, but also to his Patreon website. I hope that you'll think about supporting him in his efforts. Please also sign up while you're looking at links for my weekly insight and guidance, many juicy tips from me, your online course doctor.
May I add one last thing before you sign off? My courses can be purchased at my website for download. And if you want hard copy, then you need to get them from the Great Courses. But if you just want download and all of the written materials as well, visit my website.
That's right. Visit Bob's website. So thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.